So, if you were wondering if there was a reason I didn't start the series with the Empire, there was. Despite being the most vanilla faction and having very standard units, the Empire is actually quite different in many aspects. Some are minor, like the damage type or reduced units health, while others are more important, like the ability to choose any lord or the ability to successfully eliminate enemy archers with your own. This time we will actually start with a discussion of spells, because they are rather crucial in the ongoing choice of lord, items and units. On average, Empire spellbook is rather mediocre. Unlike the clans, it doesn't provide a significant power boost for the faction, but rather gives it a way to overcome its biggest weakness, the risk of being wiped out before your healer even has a chance to act, and for this task it actually has all you need. All elemental ward types plus mind 1. Air and water on tier 1, Earth on tier 2, Mind on 3, Fire on 4 and Death on 5. Through the last one doesn't really matter. Airward obviously doesn't have much use, as apart from the Empire only Elf Lords, Dragons and Tempest Giants use it, but occasionally it may be handy. The same goes for the Water Ward. Those sole purpose is fights against Sons of Emir, and they are rare. Earth and Mind Wards, while more expensive, are still affordable to use, but here is the thing. The units against whom you would like to use them, such as Shade, Incubus, Succubus and Medusa, are all easy targets for your assassins and mages, so most of the time you simply don't need them. As for the Fire Ward, it is just too expensive to be used against normal enemies and exists almost exclusively for the final battle. The second big thing in your spellbook is Celerity, which boosts your initiative by 10%. Despite being only level 1 spell, it is in fact your main weapon. It ensures that Empire units will always have the first turn, which is already enough to eliminate the biggest threats and avoid being wiped out. Thanks to its low price, you can have it in every fight you need. On one hand, this buff is situational, unlike Ice Shield, which is always useful, but on the other hand, in case where you don't need it, you likely have no problems whatsoever. Another of your main buffs is Holy Armor, providing an additional 20 armor. While the buff itself is replaceable, its presence in your spellbook is a different story. The thing is, other factions also have access to it through the Staff of Protection. So, on the bright side, you have a free item expert slot, but on the other hand you have to waste mana learning the spell, which isn't cheap. Besides, you don't actually have many interesting items to expert in addition to your standard artifacts, except maybe the one with damage, but we will talk about that a bit later. And of course the second, and probably bigger problem with having Holy Armor is that it's all you have. Clans, in addition to getting it from the staff, have Ice Shield and Chant of Fortitude for very easy armor stacking, while the Empire has only Holy Armor. Next we have Haste, which restores half of your movement points, but is simply more expensive and half as effective as Clan's version. So instead of being used every turn, it is more of a tool to allow an additional fight in the current turn. And if your hero has a high movement pool, maybe even 2 fights, if you remove boots after the buff is applied. The healing spell, as always, is too expensive to rely on. But also the Empire can restore health in battle, there aren't always enemy squads available to do it. And if you didn't choose a Warrior Lord, just several turns of spell barrage from enemy are enough to significantly reduce your unit's already low HP bars. Besides, for Thieves and Archangels, healing in battle is not an option in the first place. As for summons, the situation is quite grim, as the Empire has only level 2 and level 4 summons. Level 2 summons on average are quite useless. The maximum they can achieve is eliminate an enemy Rod Bearer. At the same time, they are too expensive to be used as scouts. Specifically, Living Armor has immunity to poison and mind, which gives it an edge against punches, who, thanks to built-in difficulty accuracy modifier, are a pain even for high tier summons. But for the rest, its stats aren't incredible, and even a Dwarven Champion is an impossible match for it. The Golem on the other hand is barely better than the Valkyrie, but being tier 4 it is simply too expensive to use. As a result, the Empire has big problems with map control and must primarily rely on secondary heroes in this regard. But since its units are balanced around healers and have reduced HP, they are very weak duelists at low levels, so either way it's a pain. Okay, now we are ready to talk about lords. The Warrior Lord, despite everything, is still useful, mostly as passive protection against enemy spells and as support for secondary heroes who may have problems maintaining their HP. But why play a Warrior if this time you can choose something more fancy? Mage. As you have seen, Empire Spellbook has a lot of situational tools, but pretty much nothing that you would actually want to double cast, except maybe an occasional haste. As such, the main pro of the mage is just the additional mana, as it will save you quite a lot on learning spells and of course allow a bit early access to spells like Celerity and Holy Armor. And this is actually useful, as it helps with tempo and as such with map control. It's not much, but you need all the help you can get with it. Guildmaster grants thieves additional actions and reduce the cost of upgrading towns by 50%. A little spoiler here, the last part is the most useful, but anyway. New tricks against squads. Assassination, a chance to randomly kill one unit. Steal item, well, self-explanatory, and false orders, shuffling units' position in enemy party. For cities, steal gold, steal spell, riot, which pretty much paralyzes the city for several rounds. And finally there is also the option to buy out a neutral town for a pile of gold. So let's start with the main problem. The success chance of Thief's action is determined by the squad leader level or the level of the city. This means that you have a reliable chance to perform an action only against the weakest enemies, where you don't need Thief shenanigans in the first place. And against difficult encounters, it is pretty much only possible to brute force the random with 10 Thieves, which require a lot of gold. Gold that you won't have. Assassination, surprisingly, it's one of the most useful abilities out there. As I already mentioned, Empire Tier 1 units are rather weak, which makes it difficult to defend the cities. Of course, you have Titans, but most of the time it's cheaper to assassinate one of the enemies and suddenly the enemy doesn't possess a threat any longer. It is especially funny to remove 2 slot units this way, like gargoyles. Stealing items is not really usable, as you don't actually have the means to scan enemy heroes to know which of them might have something valuable. Most of the time it's heroes with high battle counter, but there are no guarantees here. Besides, your thief will need a backup plan for escaping. And finally, you actually want to clear ruins yourself to get additional gold and not to wait for enemies to do it instead. So in the majority of cases they won't have anything particularly useful to steal. False orders is an ability that in theory is an outright win button. When you swap the enemy front line and back line, there is not much left that they can do. In reality, it all comes down to 2 things: a very low chance to pull it off against dangerous squads, and the fact that it does very little against 2 cell units. Besides, it kills the fun, turning otherwise interesting battles into plain encounters. As for cities, stealing gold sounds like a plan. But to steal something, the enemy needs to have it in the first place. And the AI immediately spends gold the moment it gets it. You have probably noticed that when you capture capitals, you get lots of mana but barely any gold at all. And yeah, the amount of gold you steal is random. Steal spell. Now that's something intriguing. Getting a spell from another faction for free, that's powerful. In theory. So apart from the already mentioned problem of low chance, there are several other aspects that drag this ability down. First of all, there is a question of what spells you would want to steal in the first place. And the answer is quite short actually. Clans have a better haste and some good mobility spells, but the AI won't learn them, so forget about it. Then there are Ice Shield and Valkyrie. From the Undead and Legions, it's pretty much only summons, but you will need a very different sort of mana for them. So you can see that actually the chance for enemy to have something from this list is not that high. Most of the time you will find several low tier damage spells and that's it. Finally, the fact that AI uses some spell doesn't actually mean that it has learned it. Apparently there are some spells that are sort built in. For example, Legions can always cast Beliar, but you will not find it in the list of spells to steal from. Overall, the new town tricks are all very disappointing against the AI. So whom to choose? The difference isn't big. The mage gives you a small boost in tempo, while the guildmaster helps to hold already conquered territories. It is more like a matter of taste. Pegasus Knight, the most vanilla warrior hero without any stat cons or pros. His flight is quite handy, as the Empire doesn't have movement spells like the clans. But there is one unique thing for the Empire that makes him even less desirable choice than other warrior heroes: the party composition. Specifically, unlike others, the Empire pretty much always takes 2 support units, which means you have only 1 slot in the backline for an archer or a mage. Assassin, while not perfect for it, can be used as frontliner, but a mage, no. So if you choose the Pegasus Knight, you will have only one unit with AoE elemental damage, and that often is not enough. Besides, the White Mage is only tier 4 and as such is the weakest among mages. Overall, AoE damage is the weakness of the Empire both ways. They are simultaneously quite vulnerable to it and lack units with it themselves. Ranger, another most standard example of its class without any bonuses or penalties whatsoever. Thanks to his mobility, he is the best candidate for Roadbearer Hunter secondary hero, or as a Suicide Archer squad leader when you need to harass garrison at lower levels. Apart from that, there is not much to say about him. Archmage. It may be easy to overlook him, but in terms of raw combat power, he is the strongest of the mage heroes. Warmaster is also very powerful, but as he trades stats, it's a bit of a different story. So what makes the Archmage the best one? Two very little things: damage type and celerity. Air is the second best type after Earth, and miles better than Fire of Archterror and Lich Queen. Only dragons, elves and elementalists has protection against it. And celerity guarantees that he will act before enemy mages from the very first mission. Little things, but they matter. Archangel, in theory, she's the second best road bearer after the Dwarven champion. But in practice, it all comes down to the accuracy bonus that the AI has on higher difficulties. As a result, while she can beat level 2 summons, in practice it takes forever, as they almost never miss and you outheal the defending squire by only 5 HP. The same is true for duels with other road heroes. A Banshee will keep your guardian forever paralyzed. Thief. Nothing special to say about him. As the Empire normally doesn't go with warrior loot, his life expectancy is one duel, which is kinda typical for the Thieves anyway. As for artifacts, there are two unique ones in the Empire's campaign. The first one is the already familiar Unholy Dagger, which has zero use for a faction with dedicated healers. And another one is Soul Crystal, giving a chance to paralyze the target. And this one is actually good. Its effect is much better than Hag's Ring or Wicked Blade, and overall the chance against single enemies is quite reliable. Besides, as the Empire has one item transfer slot free, it is possible to carry both Soul Crystal and Damage Artifact, and rotate them depending on the situation. But overall, a Damage Artifact isn't really as important for the Empire. Why so? Well, for other factions, a hero one-shotting enemy mages and archers is almost the only way to effectively protect the party. And the Empire has not only a very good archer, but the right of the first throne through celerity. So even if the hero does not have enough damage to one-shot, the mage and assassin will back him up. Squire, in comparison to warriors of other factions, has 20 HP less. This makes him the weakest and creates a lot of problems for secondary heroes and during town defense. Then the Elder Sons inherit Father's old neck and become Knights, while everyone else joins the Inquisition. Knights get a standard 50 HP and 25 damage, and overall this is the default path for the warriors of the Empire. After serving long enough for the hair to turn grey, the Knights become Imperial Knights, another 50 HP and 25 damage. Then comes another choice, between Angel and Paladin. Angel is the offensive version, getting only 25 HP but 50 damage in return. This effectively makes him the highest damage tier 4 warrior in the game, but very fragile at the same time. Paladins, on the other hand, are old enough to actually lose 25 HP, but it gets compensated by 30 armor points and 25 additional damage. As a result, they effectively get the standard bonuses, but it's easier to heal them up. Finally, the last choice lay between Holy Avenger and Defender of Fate. Defender of Fate is straightforward upgrade of Paladin. He gets 50 HP, 25 damage and 20 initiative, which makes him even faster than Archers. Holy Avenger gets 75 HP, loses his armor, and now strikes 2 times for 75 damage. This makes him the highest DPS warrior in the game. Alternatively, Solomon Kane gets 10 HP less than Knight, but from now on is immune to Mind. This is useful, but not really. At the same time, Witch Hunter has 30 HP less compared to Zombie, so overall low-tier Inquisition fighters are not worth it, and it's better to stick with Knights. After promotion, Witch Hunter becomes an Inquisitor, again getting 10 HP less than normal. Well, at least they make up for it with style. Finally, we have Grand Inquisitor. He actually gets 20 HP less than standard, but now has Firewood. Also, he needs only 800 experience to level up further. And of course, as with the whole branch before him, he looks incredible. So whom to choose and when? Angel, while not bad overall, is simply outclassed by tier 5 units. so he comes into play either when you only have access to tier 4 or when you are sort of speedrunning a map and will not be able to accumulate enough experience or gold for the next tier. At the same time, Inquisitor, thanks to his fast leveling speed, very soon catch up with Angel in terms of HP, while the initial 25 damage gap shrinks to around 15. So on paper, 15 damage less for Mind, Immunity and Fireward doesn't look like a bad deal. Hell, he looks like a perfect candidate for the final mission. But there are two factors that makes Inquisitors redundant. First is Prophetess, who will remove paralysis from warriors in case of fighting ghouls or phantom warriors. And with Celerity you will never lose a turn due to the undead winning the initiative. And for shades and similar units who could turn off Prophetess herself, you have Assassin. The second factor is ward spells in your book. While the fire one is quite expensive, it's still not a problem to cast it for the boss fight. Which brings us to tier 5. Defender of Faith is sort of a gold standard. Without taking into account any external factors, he is the best. But as soon as you add Celerity into the equation, Holy Avenger takes the lead. The initial difference between 70 and 50 initiative is huge, but when you compare 55 to 70, for a warrior it's almost the same. The latter has an advantage against archers, but by the time fighters reach them, most likely they are already dead anyway. And apart from that, having 25 additional damage and the ability to make 2 strikes and as such overcome the damage cap is a huge boon. Ah yes, about double strike. There is one annoying thing about it. A normal warrior has an 80% chance to deal his full damage and 20% chance to miss. For Holy Avenger, it's only 64 to deal full damage and 4% to miss with both his hits. So it's hard to rely on him when you need to finish a target with more than 75 HP, as he misses every third round. On the bright side, his overall damage is still high. He can finish a low HP target and strike the next one, so less damage is wasted. And finally, with overleveling, units also improve their accuracy by 1%, so on long or high level maps this problem eventually evaporates. A parenthesis. In comparison to other faction mage has 10 HP less. And while it's supposed to be a problem, it's actually not. Enemy mage simply die before they turn. And parties with multiple archers, yeah, those will hit, and hit hard, but they target support, not the mage. Also, he attacks with Air 2. It's not as crucial as for a hero, but still pleasant. On tier 2 he becomes mage, getting a standard 30 HP and 15 damage boost. After this, there is a choice. Continue as a nuke and become wizard, or swap into a summoner, elementalist. Wizard gets another standard stat boost, and after getting enough experience he finally becomes a white mage. So compared to Pandemonius, white mage has 10 HP less and he will never become tier 5, which effectively means that the Empire has the worst mage in the game. And that's true of course, but once again, it all comes down to Celerity. Yeah, white mage stats are quite underpowered, yet he almost always will have the first turn, and that is better. In Disciples, having one turn advantage is huge. What I mean is, for example, if we compare White Mage to Madeus, before Madeus makes his second attack, White Mage will have already struck twice, so it's 120 damage against 75. Add another round and it turns into 180 against 150. In fact, White Mage will be overleveled at least once, so that's an additional 12 or 18 damage to his. Unfortunately, Elementalist is completely a different story. He's terrible. His HP doesn't improve, and instead of attacking, he now summons air elementals with 100 HP, 40 damage, the ability to attack any position, and only 40 initiative. Besides, they will act only on the next turn after being summoned. So, as we all know, it creates a lot of problems. For the cost of occupying 2 cells in your party, by the time Air Elemental inflicts his 40 damage, Wizard will have dealt 90 damage to all enemies. Some people will say that Elementalist may be good for Archangel, as her leadership will be lower for a longer period of time, and as such he will have free space for summons, or to use him as town defender. But no. Archangel as a main hero is already very tanky and can heal. She does not need mid shields. Her concern is DPS, and he doesn't bring it. For the same reason, he's also bad as town defender. Enemies will bring down Elementalist much faster than his summons can deal with the enemy party. Also, air elementals don't improve with the overleveling of the master. And finally, to have him, you must give up White Mage, so your main party composition will suffer. Archer. 45 HP, 25 damage and 60 initiative. The most standard archer among all factions. Not even standard, but rather ideal. On tier 2 he turns into marksman, with an additional 45 HP and 15 damage. Archer is very vulnerable, but Marksman is already somewhat capable of standing in the first line if you need it. In defense stance, his effective HP is already enough to survive an Ogre strike, but overall at this stage he still isn't very interesting. Finally, Marksman becomes Imperial Assassin, and now we are talking. An additional 45 HP, 20 flat damage and 20 as poison. Besides, his hit chance rises to 85, making him very reliable. What can you say? He's a professional. But it's not only the stats. The portrait and animation are all top-notch. The idea of turning an archer into a melee assassin who instead of shooting actually goes for his target is just something beyond cool. One of my favorite units in the game. So assassin is the best true archer in the game. Only Horde's death is better. But you know, to have her you need to give up vampires, and besides, she eventually gets nerfed to the ground in Rise of the Elves. Anyway, in general, archers are used against enemy mages, and of course in this regard he's much better than Gargoyle or Forge Guardian, but that's not the point. Normally archers are ineffective against enemy archers, so they cannot really protect your squishy units. To kill an enemy archer you will need first of all 2 of your own, and they both will need to win the initiative roll, which most of the time won't happen. And Assassin Under Celerity is actually capable of doing it. Of course you will need 2 assassins in your party for this, and thanks to poison they don't stack that well, besides there is not much room in the party for that. But later on a hero with first strike can replace one of them. Finally, he's a decent frontliner. Not as durable as a warrior, but his HP pool is enough to survive. All through, sometimes you will need to rely on defense. But the ability to have mage in the backline and at the same time archer to deal with enemy high priority targets is more than worth it. Besides, he falls in terms of damage only to Holy Avenger, and even then not always, as poison can be applied to several targets simultaneously, and high accuracy also compensates for lower damage. And of course, against units with armor, he is great. Support units of the Empire are healers, starting with Acolyte. 50 HP, 20 single target heal and 10 initiative. As you may notice, her HP is not quite typical for the Empire. While most other units have it reduced, Acolyte is in fact more durable than Ghost and Cultist. Only Tenderfoot is tougher. After this there is a split. The boys continue to heal in single target but stronger, while the girls help everyone at once, but for less. So the boys becomes priests, an additional 25 HP and 20 points of healing, which effectively doubles it. At all stages, both genders get 25 HP, so I will not mention it further. The next stage of priest development is Imperial Priest, with an additional 40 points to healing, which doubles it again. Finally, at tier 4, Imperial Priest turns into Hierophant. He gets another 40 points to healing and the ability to revive dead units. Every unit can be revived once per battle, so corpse running isn't an option here. Now for the girls. Acolyte turns into Cleric. Her healing power stays at 20, but now she heals the whole party at once. At tier 3, Cleric becomes Matriarch. Getting another 20 points to heal, from now on she also cures negative effects. The final stage of the branch is Prophetess, with an additional 30 points to her power. So whom to use and when? First of all, it must be mentioned that one healer is simply not capable of keeping your party alive. On higher levels, giving up 2 party slots isn't a big deal overall, as all Empire units except Titan occupy only 1 cell and deal quite decent damage. But at level 1 it means that apart from the hero, you have only 1 additional unit to deal damage. This means that battles will last an eternity, and it is better to avoid some enemies altogether. At the stage when you have access to only tier 2, Priest is MVP. Since your leadership is low, most of the time you will need to heal 1 or 2 units at a time. This means that compared to 2 clerics, 2 priests can heal in a sort of AoE for the same 40 points, but at the same time they can focus heal a single target for 80 points. This is very important when you fight single heavy hitting units like ogres or trolls. After this at tier 3, the girls become pretty much the only right choice. Together they will heal the whole party for 80 points. First of all, it's already enough to keep your frontliners alive even under focused fire. Then, as your party grows in size, more and more units will require treatment simultaneously. And as you remember, the Empire is generally vulnerable to AoE damage. Finally, the ability to remove paralysis and dot effects is actually very significant. As for Hierophant, unfortunately, it's much easier to keep your party alive with AoE healing than to resurrect a fallen one. One of his biggest weaknesses is that he doesn't heal himself in addition to his prime target, like for example healers in WoW can do. Overall, in a small party as a single healer, he would be better than Prophetess. The problem is that by the time you get Hierophant, your party won't be small anymore. And in the late stage, the stronger single target healing isn't actually needed, as Empire units don't have such huge HP pools and mostly rely on mitigated damage with armor. What I mean is that 2 girls heal for 140 HP, which is more than a single Hierophant can heal. At the same time, 2 Hierophants can heal for 240 HP, but your units don't even have that much. Holy Avenger has only slightly more, 250. Last but not least, a party with Hierophants without enormous investment in the form of potions is pretty much incapable of seizing enemy capitals. And while it's not strictly speaking mandatory, it is most of the time quite desirable. The final unit of the Empire is Titan, 250 HP and 60 damage. So let's start with the pros. Her HP and damage are more than twice as high of Esquire, which effectively makes Titan the best tier 1 unit of the Empire. And as you remember, I already mentioned that Empire has quite a hard time maintaining control over captured towns. Titan is sort of an answer to this problem. But here the pros end. The price, as always for special unit, is high. To garrison the first city with Titans, you would need to spend 1300 gold. It is just simpler to use Thieves and secondary heroes as an additional and mobile layer of defense. As for Titan's stat growth, it's simply not there to consider her as a main party unit. Overall, Titan isn't useless but quite situational unit.